The name of our new venture is actually Pareto. Daniel and I, and we'll tell you a bit about the story, and those of you that are that were familiar with CIRMO or were CIRMO members, Pareto was ultimately a technology we began working on at CIRMO about 3 years ago. And we decided ultimately that it was going to be better served as a freestanding platform because the value proposition was just so dramatically different from what CIRMO had offered to physicians. And Daniel calls me one day and he says, I got the name. I said, okay, what is it? He says, it's Pareto. I said, okay, like, how do we spell that? And he explained to me, well, the reason that he's so intrigued by this name is because there was an Italian economist named Wilfred Pareto who, among coming up with the 80-20 rule, which many of you are probably familiar with, also was obsessed with this concept of market efficiencies and of increasing access to goods and services by better adjudicating the supply and demand sides of the equation. And it's very much the goal that this entity has been set up to try to achieve in healthcare. But then, of course, we look for the spelling, and somebody already owns that URL, and Dan says, oh, that's no problem. We'll just spell it P-A-R, number 8, letter O. I said, do you really think that people are going to understand that? He goes, oh, yeah, sure, it's no problem. And I said to him, okay, well, I'm not sure about this, but I'll make you a deal. If the URL Par8o is available and I can redirect it to Par8o, I'll sign on board. And so I looked and it was. And the rest was history. So we became Pareto, spelled P-A-R, number 8, letter O. But it's actually been pretty cool. It makes for a good conversation piece. So Daniel and I, whenever we do these presentations and discussions, we really like to emphasize the discussion part. So we love questions coming in, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll try to get through whatever content we have here in, 15 minutes or so, really, and then leave plenty of time for open discussion, because we find that's when the best stuff really happens. And with that, I'll turn it over and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Palestrina. As Adam said, I'm his co-founder for Pareto. Before I say anything, what I want to do is to thank all of you for your time and your attention, and quite frankly, the privilege for us to be able to come here and present to you. I want you to all know how much we appreciate it. And in particular, Jane Orient and Jeremy, thank you very much for both the opportunity and the coordinating. It's been flawless, quite frankly. As Adam said, we're going to try and cover a few things here, but the goal is to do it as quickly as possible. Because ideally what we want to be able to do is to show you the technology that we've been building. In many ways, this is the culmination of 7 years of development. It was 7 years ago that I had a herniated disc and sort of put down my scalpel and left clinical medicine and started working on CIRMO. And this is the culmination of everything that we've learned about technology development, about building products, but perhaps most important, about empowering physicians. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we've come from. Ideally, we'd like to show you a demo of the technology, but then what we'd like to really focus on for this presentation was that the initial inception of the company, the birth of it, was this concept of how can you empower physicians? We've had some experience during the healthcare reform debate about just how difficult it is. And one of the key conclusions that we came away from in the healthcare reform debate that we've tried to apply in this product is that if we're going to change medicine, we need to find a way to translate individual action on the part of the physician into collective action for the profession. Put another way, we need to create molecular impact from atomic action. And I'm going to show you how we believe that this technology and this approach can start doing this for physicians. Okay, so what we've learned. As Adam alluded to, about 7 years ago, we started CIRMO. CIRMO means conversation in Latin. And the basic premise behind CIRMO was you can improve patient outcome and patient care by allowing doctors to talk with one another. And I think by most measures, we were able to accomplish that. Today, CIRMO remains the largest online physician community with about 150,000 US physicians, or about 1 in 5 US physicians. We're terribly proud of the impact that it has on care day to day. But something interesting happened about 3 years ago, which was the healthcare reform debate kicked up. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves at ground zero inside of the healthcare reform debate. I don't think up until then, Adam and I either of us had been particularly political, but sure enough, we found ourselves in the middle of it. And as we saw the healthcare reform debate play out, we started to see some things. In addition to being sort of a civics class in sort of the role of how our government works or doesn't work, depending on how you might look at it, we started to see how and why this bill was coming together. As we were spending 2, 3, 4 days a week in Washington, D.C., oftentimes seeing Hal and some of the other folks that were trying to advocate for physicians, we learned that physicians were failing to successfully advocate for themselves. Perhaps most importantly, that we realized that the downfall of the physician was increasingly coming from commoditization. It didn't take a tremendous amount of perspective to understand why physicians were being...
You gotta be on camera here.
Yeah. It didn't take a lot of understanding to try and figure out why physician services were being commoditized. You literally had to just follow the money. And the reason why you could follow the money is because Sermo early on had struck a strategic partnership with the American Medical Association. That was a partnership that was based on the concept of maybe the AMA would like to know what physicians thought about the AMA policies. And within a few months of this partnership, what Adam and I started to realize was the AMA didn't care about physicians. We'd come in every day and we'd present the data. This is what doctors are saying and what doctors are thinking. The AMA just didn't care. And then we started asking some funny questions, which was we'd spend time in the AMA headquarters. And having been in Goldman Sachs' headquarters or Bank of America's headquarters, I'll tell you, the AMA headquarters makes them all look like Walmart. This was one of the most opulent settings I'd ever been in my entire life. And after we got the tour of the private art gallery and the executive boardroom, we started asking some questions. One of our first questions was, where does all the money come from? And what we learned very quickly is that the money comes from the CPT codes. And the CPT codes, if anyone doesn't know this, it's important that physicians do. The CPT codes are not only the primary revenue source of the AMA, the CPT codes are what have led to the commoditization of the physician practice. It's not a subtle point. It's not a jab at the AMA. This is who owns your, well, gluteus maximus, for lack of a better word. It is the AMA and the CPT codes. Okay, what's the next thing we learned? The next thing we learned is that there's going to be a fundamental change coming to healthcare. As we watched this bill get written, and we actually did read the bill front to end, we realized that it didn't make sense. We're somehow going to add 30 million lives to the healthcare system. We're going to try and lower the cost curve precisely at the moment when the resources are starting to decrease. Well, they're starting to decrease for a number of reasons. First and foremost is that you're starting to see significant retirement among physicians. You're starting to see a change in the work patterns between younger physicians and older physicians. But most importantly, as you've seen the move from individual physician practices to employed physicians, all the data is the same. Productivity goes down and costs go up. And so somehow this bill was going to somehow magically resolve this. And so what Adam and I started saying, well, if you can't change it, if this thing's going to go down one way or the other, we might as well start saying, how can we equip physicians to benefit from this sort of inevitable sequence of events? And what we realized is that mathematically there's an absolute certainty that something is going to happen in 2014, which is that fundamentally there's going to be what economists call a supply-demand inequality. You're going to have 30 million new lives coming in just as the number of physician productivity hours start to go down. Anyone who thinks that EMRs and nurse practitioners and PAs are going to fix this problem, I got a news for you. It just isn't going to happen. And so ultimately, this is where the seed of an idea came from Adam and I. There's a supply-demand coming up, a supply-demand inequality coming up. Physician resources, despite what everybody would like to think and what bureaucrats in Washington might say, it is what's known as an inelastic resource. It takes anywhere from 6 to 12 years to mint a physician, at least. That inelasticity, physicians need to realize just how precious a commodity they have and just how much command and control they really can have on the value of their services. And what we're going to try and show you is a technology that we believe can be a small step in that direction. As I said, what we're going to try and do with the technology is to figure out a way to create a broad mechanism that can ultimately impact not just our profession, but potentially our society and healthcare in general. But the key is you need to figure out a way that you can motivate the individual physician. Why were we so convinced of this? And the reason why we were so convinced was that while at Sermo, Adam and I had tried to do something called the Open Letter Campaign. And for a good year or two, we threw every ounce of energy, a couple $100,000, all of our effort around a campaign to get doctors to sign an open letter dictating what physicians felt would be the key things to improving healthcare. It's the obvious stuff, guys. Transparency in pricing, malpractice reform. And we were successful in the sense that we got over 10,000 physicians to sign that petition. But we learned an important lesson, which is that physicians are busy. They have responsibilities. They don't have time to go to Washington to lobby for themselves. And the key insight that we got was that if we're going to make a change, you've got to figure out how to allow physicians to act in what I call enlightened self-interest. You've got to allow the individual physician to take small actions that ideally will benefit them, their practice, their patients, and their families, but do it in such a way where it can have that molecular impact, if you will, on the broader profession and ultimately on the industry. The technology that we're going to show you, we believe will allow you to do that. What Adam and I, as we started unpacking and figuring out how to go after this, we realized that you needed a point of entry, if you will, that had a low activation energy and ideally could have big ramifications and even better still, could potentially have a viral element to it. It could potentially grow quickly. And what we started to focus on very soon was the issue of referrals. Before you even look at referrals vis-a-vis Pareto, it's worth pointing out that referrals are an interesting phenomena. On the one hand, as my mentor used to say, healthcare on many levels is a business and referrals are the currency of that business. From an economic standpoint, referrals are intriguing in the sense that in the last 10 years they've doubled from 50 million referrals a year in this country to 100 million referrals. But more important still is the fact that referrals typically occur when there's a change in diagnosis or an escalation in care. It's a critical moment in the healthcare journey of a patient. Mark my word, this is the next battleground. This is going to be the next place where industry is going to try and restrain your ability to care for your patients. And the reason why is because who you refer to has massive downstream impact on what the ultimately quality and care of that patient is and the cost. If you want to maintain the best care for your patient, if you want to continue to provide the kind of care that we're all so determined to do, you must maintain control of the referral process. There's something else interesting, though, about referrals. Referrals are the last part of the healthcare equation where doctors, physicians, us, control both sides of that equation. And that is why we realize that if we can get physicians to help one another by helping themselves, we might actually be able to start something real here. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is to show you the technology. I had a mentor down at Duke, Dr. Bollinger, who used to say, under absolutely never, ever do live demos. Because as Dr. Bollinger pointed out, that they never ever work. So I'm tempting Dr. Bollinger's advice here. Let's make this a little bit more real. And let's go ahead and update the profile that I have in here and use it in such a way where it will reflect somebody in the audience. So may I pick somebody from the audience? Let me put your address into the system, if I may. Anyone? Miss? Where do you live? Okay, hold on. Oh, an Indiana person.
I'm an Indy.
A staging server. I can't show you the live system for HIPAA compliance reasons, but this is the staging server. And what Adam and I realized when we started working on this was we needed to create a referral mechanism that was not only universal, meaning that from day one you could refer a patient to every other doctor in the country, and I'm going to show you this in a moment. But what we realized is that it had to be free. We'll talk about business model in a moment. But it also had to be idiot simple to use. In fact, we coined an expression. Some people here in the room have PhDs. Can I see a raise by show of hands? I don't want to offend you with my statement, but we came up with a new term for PhD. We call it push here doctor. Push here doctor. In other words, the design is supposed to be simple. The other thing I'll point out is that we realized very, very quickly that most physicians in their offices, the majority of the referral process is done by their staff. And so everything I'm going to show you here is very optimized for staff use as well. And I'll explain that in just a moment. Miss, let's say you're doing a referral. What kind of specialist do you want to do a referral to today?
ENT.
ENT, okay. You want to guess which button you click? Okay. So let's say you were going to do an ENT referral. We benchmarked the technology so it takes no more than about 60 seconds for you or your staff member to do the whole referral process. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to enter in just enough information to get that patient in to see the referral, which is usually the first name or the last name. The next thing we heard from physicians is, don't give me this vomit from an EMR, the 50 pages that I have to look through to try and understand why you sent me the patient. Give me that brief, almost Twitter-like reason that I can look at as I'm walking into the room. That's all people want when they get a referral, which you can see Adam is typing in. The next step is you got to pick what plan the patient's on. What's a common plan in your neighborhood, ma'am?
Key benefits.
Key benefits. So let's try maybe Aetna.
Or Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and pick perhaps CoreGuard. So you say to the system what the plan is. And what the technology did right there is it suggested to you physicians who might be a good fit for that referral. In a moment, I'll show you how we tie that together inside of the product and how we can use that to empower physicians. But the key is, as I said, it's universal. Ma'am, can you give me the name of any physician in your neighborhood that you like to refer to, what their first name or last name might be? Tom Whiteman. There we go, Thomas Whiteman. Is that the one? Wonderful. How about another physician? This time maybe not an ENT.
Not an ENT?
Not an ENT. Just any physician in your neighborhood. Melham?
Yeah.
M-E-L-H-A-M.
M-E-L-H-A-M, yes.
There you go. Tom Melham. Okay, so why don't we select that, Dr. Adam? And then at this point, the physician can hand off the referral to their staff to complete it, or they can complete it themselves. As I said, it's very carefully designed for staff participation. We gathered just the basic information so that the receiving office can then contact the patient and schedule the referral, because one of the things that we learned from our experience was that the initiating office is tired of tying up their staff trying to call people. Plus, there's the issue that 20 to 40% of the time, patients never follow up with their referrals. So we put in some contact information so the receiving office can contact that patient. And then once that's done, we click Send Referral Now. And after a confirmation screen, you're dropped into a dashboard. And that dashboard allows you and your staff to track your inbound and outbound referrals. If I may, let me tie this all together for just a second. Can we flip back to the deck for a moment? The way how we're achieving what you just saw right there is that we've built an actual platform. And the platform that allows that universal perspective that you just saw has 4 elements to it. One is a very sophisticated registration process. The second is what we saw a moment ago with the referral and the magic moment. And the third is the dashboard. And the reason why all of these are important is that they make it for that fire and forget mechanism. The registration process, in other words, how people are onboarded, is critical to the adoption of the technology. And for us, every time you send a referral to an unaffiliated physician, that's actually an opportunity for them to be able to start using the system. We also make it very easy for you to get your staff on board. After you register for Pareto, you'll get an email, and if you just forward that email to your staff, they're each able to register and start managing your referrals. What that does is it allows it to become a very adoptable, very easy-to-use system, as I said, PhD. When we send a referral to a receiving office, one of the things that they get is a code that if they want to go find out more about that referral, they go to our website, they type that information in, and we both verify that they are who they say that they are, and then allow them to get the referral information. But the most important thing of all is that what we call the magic moment. You saw a moment ago where Adam picked a plan, and in the staging server on the demo, there was a little yellow sticky pad there. On the live system, what we do is we feature a physician there. And the critical thing about how we feature the physician, in this case you can see it's a doctor at University of Miami. But the most important thing that we do when we feature one of those physicians is that you'll see in the top right-hand corner, we'll say how quickly that physician is willing to see a patient with that plan. What we call a TTA, time to appointment. This goes back to what I was saying before. TTA is going to become among the most important metrics out there in healthcare. In 2014, as you see the 30 million new lives come in, you're going to see that TTA get pushed out further and further and further as we become more of a European or a British-style multi-tiered healthcare system. My first message for you today is start focusing on the TTA. The TTA is going to be among physicians' last levers in being able to decommoditize their services. And what our technology is designed to do, what this moment is doing, is it's putting power back into the hands of the physicians. And I'll show you precisely how we're doing that in a moment. But the key is that you're allowing physicians to be able to to have some pricing power, if you will. That's a plan. Maybe it's a cash patient. I'll see that patient within a day or two. Maybe it's an insurer who's good in its payment terms and pays quickly. I'll see that patient within 2 to 3 days. But what it does is it starts putting power back in your hands. It allows you to transmit to the referring party, this is how quickly I'm willing to see that patient. In the economic theory, this is what's known as price discovery. And to be very blunt, that's what the AMA took away from physicians. They took away your ability to differentiate yourself from one another. Very quickly, just concluding the demo, the other things that we do to make the technology work is that we tie together the pieces, but perhaps most importantly, when you send that referral, it creates a cascade of events that do everything possible to make sure that that referral goes through. It's about 8 different things that happen simultaneously. As I said, an email goes out to the reciprocal office, a fax goes out to the reciprocal office, we follow up with a patient, we do all the different things necessary to make sure that the staff, the physician, and ultimately the patient are involved in trying to make sure that that referral goes through. And the reason why that's critical is we all know that there's about a 20 to 40% drop-off rate in terms of number of patients that actually follow through with their referrals. What we do is we tie it all together with what I refer to as the FedEx effect, in the sense that we all like it when FedEx gets our delivery there, but the key with FedEx is being able to track each step of the way. And so once you do your first referral through the Pareto system, then what the technology will then do is that it will allow you to actually start the process of then tracking step by step as those referrals move forward. And whether it's HEDIS data or simply making sure that there's good continuity of care for your patient, you'll receive an email every single day saying, these are your outstanding referrals and what their status of it is. As I said, everything that I've shown you so far about our product is completely free. You're able to send and receive as many referrals as you want for free. And since we launched about 2 months ago, we're signing up anywhere between 200 and 500 physicians a week. What I'd like to do in the next section, I'm going to hand over the mic to Adam, is we'll show you how this technology can start achieving what our original goal was, which was physician empowerment. So Adam?
We can pause for any questions while he's moving on to slides, too. So on that first page of the referral, you could jump back to that slide if you want to, Daniel. When we ask for the patient's name and we ask for the reason for referral, you see down below where it says payer. Oh, that's your slide's old. You got to go. we changed this. Where it says payer, there are 4 or 5 options. One is insurance, which is private insurance. The next one is self-pay, Medicare, Medicaid, and unknown. So for those that are cash only, and we'll see this in the very next slides that we're going to walk through, you can literally say, I accept cash. That's it. And then at that moment in time, when a patient who's willing to pay cash is put into the system, you would appear at this moment in time to say, that's a patient that's of interest to me. It's a good fit for my practice. They're trying to find somebody with my clinical skill set. I'm ready, willing, and able to take care of that patient as a fee for service. No. The way that we do the results on the right-hand side is that it's a weighted average of a number of different variables. It comes down to your availability to see a patient, as Daniel was saying, is a key component there. Payer is one of those variables, but it's not the only variable. And then what we do is we take, we also take into consideration geographic location. How close is your office to the office of the referring doctor? So, i.e., how convenient would this be for the patient? Your skill sets, and there's a place on the site where you can list your skill sets, and we start to map those skill sets back to the needs of that particular patient. And then we take that weighted average, and that's how we do the rank order list on the right-hand side. So it wouldn't necessarily exclude you, but honestly, you're right. I mean, it's hard to deny your point that insurance is a key variable. Patients don't want to pay out of pocket when they've got this perception that they're supposed to be, getting everything paid for by somebody else. That's right. So, and this is a great point in that we all know what insurers are doing these days, and they are increasing the patient's deductibles. And they're saying, yeah, we'll start paying as soon as you pay $5,000 worth of your care over the year, which is essentially like not having any insurance at all. And so you're absolutely right. And we aren't doing this yet, but that is an opportunity here to say, look, you've selected this patient's insurance. Once we import that data, we can say, based on what we know about this plan, we won't know the specifics on how much that patient's paid to date, but we know, is it a high deductible plan, is it a low deductible plan? We can then start to say, the out-of-pocket cost for this patient to go see this physician who claims they take their insurance we project would be $200. Here we've got another physician who's more than happy to see the patient as a fee for service for $100 or $150. This is exactly what Daniel was speaking to earlier. That could be a bit of a challenge, right? I mean, if you've decided that in your practice you're not going to engage with any kind of, either cloud-based or EMR-based technologies, and we all heard that the great presentation yesterday about this and the challenges there, it's something that you'd have to wrestle with and decide. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So HIPAA has. I mean. Don't get us started on HIPAA, right? I mean, we could talk for hours, but HIPAA has three components. You have to have structural security, so the data has to be stored in a place where it can't be physically acquired. This is yesterday, again, from the presentation of laptops just walking outdoors. We don't store anything on site. Everything is stored by a hosting service called Firhost, if you want to know. Where they're a purely HIPAA-compliant storage facility. So they have the security measures in place, the physical security. And then you have to encrypt everything as it moves back and forth. So yeah, we meet those standards as well. And then you have to have internal, educational, blah, blah, blah. Sure. All right. So we'll see this. Can I just put a hold on your question? Because I think we're going to answer it in the next slides. Let's take one more, and then we'll have plenty of time as soon as we get through these slides. Yeah. That's correct. No, because 10 minutes. Okay. So that's correct, and that's actually something that I think Daniel didn't touch on. That's important to touch on. Well, he did state it. The system is universal, right? And we've already had those in some entities come to us and say, oh well, this looks fantastic. Can we buy your technology and use it and just only allow people to refer certain places? And Daniel and I say, absolutely not. The system is universal. It will remain universal. That's the whole point, right? So the reason that we ask ENT is because it is a key variable as to our ability to recommend a potentially good match for that patient at that moment in time, but we don't limit anybody in any way, shape, or form. If you decide you want to send to any doctor in your area or any physician in the country, just start typing their name and boom, we've got 1.2 million physicians loaded into the database. Every single one of you who's a practicing physician is in there. Let's take one more in the back and then that's what we're about to show. So let's go ahead and just run through these slides and then hopefully we'll still have a little bit of time. So what Daniel's put up here is we came to find out, we worked on this for 3 years, and we came to find out there is no universal database of insurers and plans in the country. It does not exist. Like, we looked far and wide. Is there somewhere we can buy it? Is there somewhere that we can acquire it? Is there a publicly available database? You'd think it'd be worth having, that government sponsored, whatever. Doesn't exist. So we had to literally go out on our own and build out that database, state by state by state by state. We've also done it in such a way where the physicians and the users themselves can contribute to that database and continue to improve and enhance it over time. What Daniel's showing you here is a page in the product where physicians can say, these are the insurers and plans that I accept, or that even if they accept one that they don't want to project out to everybody else, they don't have to click the box. So it's more or less, these are the insurers and plans that I'm interested in taking patients who have this payer type. What he's showing you, what the yellow bars on the right-hand side indicate is, for this payer or plan, my interest level in taking more patients who have this payer is average, good, or high. So first, I'm willing to take patients as your first decision when you click that box on the left side. And then you say, okay, now that I've said I'm willing to take them, how interested am I in taking a patient with this payer versus a patient with a different payer? Good, medium, or high. What that then does is it translates back into that moment in time again, where a payer or a patient who has a certain payer, if you've said I've got an extremely high interest in this because I have a good relationship with this payer because they aren't jerking me around, then you would be presented at that moment in time. I think you can. So this ties into how we're going to support this thing, right? We've been supporting this with our own resources up until now. And we thought long and hard, how do we create a business model that's synergistic with the broader goal? And the broader goal being to empower physicians and to create a better way of matching supply and demand in healthcare. What we came up with was what we're going to call Pareto Premium. And what Pareto Premium is a service that for about $80 a month, so we try to keep it incredibly inexpensive, so less than about $1,000 a year, what physicians can do is they can do those settings in their insurers, right? And they can also start to say, I have availability. So these are the two things that we're going to ask physicians to pay a little bit for to be able to project to their colleagues at that moment when they're looking to say, I'm interested in this patient. Now, you remember how we set those insurance preferences to low, medium, and high? So for those that you've set to, average, good, or high, you can then tell the system, for patients with this insurer, I'll typically get them in to be seen within a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever the time frame is that you choose to attach to the value or your willingness to see a patient who has any given payer. Now you can imagine how the insurance companies, once they kind of see what we're doing here, they're probably not going to be too excited about this. But you know what? It's time to level the playing field. It's time to be able to say back to them, maybe if you behave better as a payer, maybe if you don't jerk my patients around and you don't jerk me around, I'm going to be more willing to see your patients more expeditiously.
When you put those indications in and you say, this is how soon I can see a patient, this is your moment to project to the world what your appetite is for particular types of patients as you build your practice. And one of the things that we heard again and again for people who are looking to make a shift towards cash practice or start changing the composition of the practice is that everybody wants to go do it, but they can't go cold turkey. They've got bills to pay, they've got responsibilities to their practice, to their organization. What this is it's a model that allows you to start over time shifting your blend of patients. And so the first thing you would do is you'd say, let's say it was cash patients that you're doing, to the point that was made earlier on, you would set those as your patients that you're willing to see quicker. Please keep this in the context of what I said earlier on. TTA is about to become the big topic. If you tie it all the way back to the beginning and understanding of where healthcare is going, that's why physicians being empowered to start doing this is critical. We're trying to help physicians to go to where the puck is going. I saw a question there, sir.
Two questions. One is, what do you have built in here to keep insurers from penalizing doctors for this, that you will be able to keep them out of that information? And the second question is, do you have a mechanism that you will build or have built that would allow a cash patient to utilize this to self-refer to a generalist?
No and yes. So we're not doing anything. I can't block an insurance company from coming in here and looking at this. We've done it in such a way that to our best discussions with our attorneys, and I'm happy to speak with you or anyone as a sidebar after this, there seems to be very clear indication that physicians are allowed to price to what's known as a time value, the time value of an appointment, and it seems to be well within the bell curve of what's accepted within these contracts. And we've done that very, very carefully to exactly the point that you said. You talk about the consumer piece. If I may, it's phase 2 for us. We started with the physicians. We have just a moment left, and I do want to have plenty of time for questions. I just want to end on one last point, and then I will come back to questions. As Adam said, we started this with a mindset of how do we structure this in such a way that it would both work and it would be practical for physicians given everything that we've seen. As we said, we had to come up with a way to price the product to support the company. We've funded everything that you've seen to date out of our own pocket. We didn't have a payday out of Sermo. We actually traded our Sermo equity for Pareto. And ultimately, this is something that Adam and I have funded ourselves. We've tried to come up with a reasonable price, as I said, is $80 per doctor per month for that to be on the premium side of the product. What we've come here today is to propose two things. The first is that any physician who emails this address, AAPS@pareto.com, during the life of the conference, we're going to give them the first year of the premium product for free. So it's about $1,000 value. So what I'd encourage folks to do is to please email us I've talked with Jeremy. We're also going to do an email out to the AAPS list. I'd also encourage you, if you have physician colleagues, please forward this to them. During the life of the conference, by the time the conference closes, any emails that we've gotten to this address before then will give you your first year of premium for free. We're also doing something else, and I want to sort of finish on this note before we go to questions, which is that we believe in the importance of organizations like AAPS and other grassroots physician organizations. The commitment that we've made is that any physicians who use the premium product, every third month's payment, so $80 every quarter, $320 a year, we will donate to the organization of your choice. Now, if you're getting the first year for free, we're not going to donate $300 to AAPS on your behalf. But for anyone who's either not a part of that or after that first year that first year ends, you're hearing it today. I'm going on the record to say that once you start paying, once you put your credit card in, there's a screen that pops up that says, which physician organization do you want to support? And then every third month, we will send your $80 to that organization. And I've asked Jeremy to hold me to that. So with that, there were some more questions. Let's see what we can do to answer them.
The question was for Medicare and Medicaid patients, if they're seen more slowly, will you get in trouble? This is what Daniel was touching on earlier. We, the best analogy we come up with is the airline industry, right? Where you can provide the exact same service of flying somebody from point A to point B, but the guy sitting to your left paid half of what you did, and the guy sitting to your right paid double what you did for the exact same service. What was the difference there? The difference was that one of them asked for the service 6 months ago, and one of them asked for it 6 days ago. And this is the delta on time that our attorneys are telling us is more than legitimate to put a price value on. So for you to say, for you to be able to say, look, I'll see people sooner, but I'm going to pick and choose the ones I see sooner based on how I get compensated for seeing them is in our eyes completely reasonable and legitimate.
Here's the inside story we're hearing about that. What we're articulating, the country has two choices. We either have to move to rationing or we have to move to something where people pay for services based on perceived value. Those are your only two choices. It's a very stark contrast. And what we're hearing from the inside is that this is actually a pretty attractive option even to the folks in Washington, because they don't have an alternative. It's either that or you start rationing care. Getting consumers to start paying for relative value is a very attractive option. Sir?
As hospitals start, well, they've already started buying up doctors' practices, hospitals certainly aren't going to use this because they're going to refer to their owned physicians. So they own a group of physicians they're going to refer internally. And this process is escalating very quickly. How do you expect this is going to play out ultimately when the hospitals are controlling all referrals?
So I'll make an observation and then I'll speak to us specifically. The trend towards hospitals buying out physician practices, I will go on record to say is diminishing and is now reversing. But it's not going to go back to the way it was before. The reason why it's diminishing and reversing is that every single study that's come out shows that when a hospital buys a physician practice, two things happen. Productivity goes down, cost goes up. There's one possible exception to that, physician-owned and ran groups. And so what we're seeing is the emergence of the mega group. And so the pattern that I'm seeing, not in spots, but frankly across the country, is you're seeing hospitals essentially start outsourcing their physician services to these large mega groups. And I think that's going to be the trend that we're going to see going forward. Our technology, in many ways, is designed, even in that scenario, to be an interface layer so that the group can start being more efficient in how those referrals are occurring. Let's perhaps try and squeeze one, if I may, I'll follow up with you if that's okay. Let me try and squeeze one more question in. Ma'am?
Daniel knows that this is a hot spot for me, so he just handed me the microphone instinctively. So I, for one, am not a fan of the health grades and the vitals and the Angie's lists and everyone and their brother who seems to think they need to get into the business of physician ratings. What we plan to do in that arena is to layer on top of the product the ability for physicians and colleagues to provide honest assessment and feedback in a way that's dignified, in a way that's insightful to patients, but in a way that isn't designed to try to incite anxiety and fear in physicians for, oh my gosh, I've got this thing online now where somebody said something and my career is in jeopardy. I mean, I for one, am kind of tired of these like patient feedback, capabilities. Now, then there's all the data. Everything's data-centric these days, right? And yeah, to some degree, our ability to aggregate data and to start applying that data, it's both an opportunity, but in my opinion, it's also a very, very scary place to start going when you start saying we're going to purely start judging people based on what the data says, right? At the end of the day, healthcare and interactions are between a physician or a provider, I'm not a big fan of that term, and a patient. But let's be honest, there's going to be a role to be played for mid-levels into the future. There's no way to avoid it. And I think that when you start to decide who the right resource or physician is to take care of any given patient, it has a lot more to do than just with what was that physician's, perceived treatment of hemoglobin A1Cs over the past 3 months. Like, honestly, give me a break, So it's something we have our eye on. It's not something we're pursuing right now, but as Daniel said, when we go after the consumer side of things, when we start letting patients have some visibility and some access into taking some control over their own care themselves, we will probably launch some type of a physician-to-physician endorsement capability where your colleagues can judge you. You can be judged by a cohort of your peers, not by some random, anonymous person through Angie's List. Sorry, I know we're out of time. I'll take one more quickly. Well, there may be some repetitiveness in the database, because what we did is we took 3 or 4 different databases, we aggregated them together, we scrubbed them, we tried to remove physicians who were not practicing, and then we applied it to the technology. So I can double check on the exact number. I may have misspoken, but your point's well taken.
Once again, I want to end on a final note to thank Jane for the opportunity to come speak with you today, and Jeremy, unbelievable logistics and coordination.
These are our email addresses. We're very responsive. If you have any questions or any thoughts, we'd love to hear your feedback.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Palestrina and Dr. Sharp. Why don't we take a short break now and reconvene again at about 10:30.